For well over 100 years of U.S. history, our country essentially had open borders. Now, that didn't mean we didn't have any immigration laws. It just meant that for pretty much all practical purposes, they were unenforceable, especially around places like the southern border. And yet, it didn't seem to matter a whole lot. So honestly, why does it matter so much now? And some say that it shouldn't. I mean, after all, every school child knows that America is, quote, a nation of immigrants. And when one looks at the makeup of the people who were in the geographical area that we now call the United States, you will notice that they look nothing like the people who arrived at Jamestown or Plymouth Rock. From the early 1600s to the early 20th century, immigrants and indentured servants came in various waves to the United States, initially from the British Isles, but over time from places like Ireland, Germany, Italy, other areas of Europe, as well as places like China, Spanish territories, and of course, slaves from Africa. And while many of these immigrants did form tight-knit communities as evidenced by geographical names like Little Italy and Chinatown, there was a healthy degree of assimilation which lent itself to America being dubbed the Great Melting Pot. Now, I don't want to overly romanticize this. This is not to say that there were not concerns about integration, which sometimes manifested itself in legitimate concerns about society, and other times just in the form of blatant racism and xenophobia, both socially and legally. But when one considers the situation in America compared to the context of the times and what was going on in the rest of the world, it is hard not to conclude that with some obvious exceptions, America was doing a pretty good job at achieving effective assimilation. So, what are the arguments for and against open borders today? On the open borders side, the arguments range from economic to compassion to subversive. Some libertarians, such as Chase Oliver, argue that national borders are essentially socialist nonsense. This is rooted in the idea that really only individuals can own things. Governments buy property or enforce boundaries through aggression and are therefore illegitimate. Other libertarians suggest that the free flow of people, like the free flow of goods and services, is ultimately a net positive for a country. They don't necessarily deny difficulties associated with unmitigated immigration. They simply think that the economic pros outweigh the cons. Liberals often argue that it is fundamentally immoral to deny someone seeking a better life entrance into a country with so much abundance. They also generally question the intentions of those call for stricter immigration laws, suggesting that it's actually rooted in things like racism or xenophobia. On the other side of the argument, conservatives generally argue that borders are essential for both practical and legal reasons. Borders determine things like legal jurisdiction. They also determine who is eligible for certain benefits or voting rights and who is not. It also provides a clear line of demarcation between countries and therefore a fixed geographical point whereby one nation is not supposed to interfere in the internal policy of another nation. Other libertarians, such as Milton Friedman, suggest that one of the biggest impediments to open borders is the existence of the welfare state. He points out that one of the reasons why immigration did not pose the same challenges in the past as it does today is that in earlier times, when one immigrated to the United States, they did so seeking opportunity. They had to sink or swim based on their efforts because there was no massive social safety net that would be deployed to catch them, at least one not funded almost exclusively by tax dollars. And yet others will point out that there is also a cultural component that must be addressed. Successful countries are not simply lines drawn on a map, but rather a shared geographical area in which people with shared cultural commitments to things which make a nation function can exist and organize society in a way that allows for greater human flourishing. So, which side is correct? And in order to try to address this fairly, we're going to look at these questions to see if we can address the various claims presented by the two sides of this argument. We start by asking the question, can any nation currently on the earth claim that their entire population is exclusively comprised of natives and that their borders have never really shifted or infringed on other people's borders? No, you're not really going to find that anywhere. With respect to whether or not this is truly just an issue of compassion, well, we have to address the fact that we do have that welfare state that Milton Friedman mentioned. So, does a heightened sense of compassion create additional resources? No. Okay. Well, are the people advocating for open borders offering to individually cover the costs associated with such a policy? No, for the most part, they're not. Do we have examples of the people advocating for such a policy actually refusing to cover the costs? Yes, many of the sanctuary cities, which have been inundated by having illegals bust into their cities, are now asking the federal government to cover the bill. Do borders matter as a practical line of demarcation which distinguishes between one set of legal codes and another? Yes, obviously. Go into one country and you can vote and own a business. Go into North Korea and you can do whatever the regime tells you can. Is it true historically that countries with a diverse set of cultural beliefs that are contradictory with one another often lead to internal conflict and eventual disintegration? Yes, the whole of human history illustrates this point. Do we have historical examples of large populations with cultural norms significantly different from the host country, leading toward internal conflict, civil war, and the eventual destruction of a country? Absolutely. In fact, the late stages of the Roman Empire illustrate this very well. Now, here's an important question. Are there any conditions which could possibly allow for an effective open borders policy? And the answer to this is surprisingly yes, but it would require an incredibly high-trust society where at a bare minimum, the people moving across borders are at least committed to not using force or violence, whether it be by individuals, organizations, or governments, to impose their will on other people. Great. So is that what is currently taking place with illegal immigration in the United States? Absolutely not. Well then, I guess we can conclude that it's pretty difficult, nearly impossible, to actually implement a truly successful open borders policy. But for those who want to have open borders, at least now we have established some of the necessary preconditions for achieving it. So here's what I would recommend. If you really want to live in the sort of high-trust society where people can cross borders, just like they cross state borders within the United States, well, then you have to foster the sort of environment and cultural norms where such people can peacefully coexist with one another.